Hey there, English learner. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been chatting with someone new, maybe at work or at a party, and they ask you, so what was your childhood like? And suddenly you freeze. You have all these beautiful memories in your head, all these stories you want to share, but in English, the words just won't come out right. Yeah, I know that feeling. It's frustrating, isn't it? Welcome. Welcome to English Club Podcast. I'm Emily, and I'm so happy you're here with me today. This podcast is all about helping you speak English confidently in real-life situations. And today, we're going to talk about something really special, something that connects us all as humans, no matter where we're from. You know, just this morning, I was looking through old photo albums with my mom. We were sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, and she pulled out these pictures from when I was about 5 years old. And oh my goodness, the memories just came flooding back. I remembered things I hadn't thought about in years. The smell of my grandmother's cookies, the feeling of playing in the rain, the sound of my dad's laugh. And as we talked about these memories, I realized something. Sharing childhood memories is one of the most beautiful ways to connect with people. So here's what we're doing today. We are going to learn how to talk about your childhood memories in English. And I'm not just talking about simple sentences like, I was happy as a child. No. We're going deeper than that. We're going to explore how to describe your memories with details, with emotion, with the kind of language that really paints a picture for the person listening. And why does this matter? Well, let me tell you. When you meet new people, they often ask about your childhood. It's a natural conversation topic. In job interviews, they might ask about experiences that shaped you. When you're making friends, sharing childhood stories creates instant connection and trust. When you're in a relationship, talking about your past helps your partner understand who you are today. This is real, meaningful English that you'll use throughout your life. By the end of this episode, you're going to know the essential vocabulary for talking about childhood. You'll understand how to use past tenses naturally and correctly. You'll learn phrases that make your memories come alive. And most importantly, you'll feel confident sharing your own childhood stories in English with all the emotion and detail they deserve. But before we get started, hey, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe to our channel for more English learning podcasts. It really helps us create more content for you. Seriously, every like and subscription makes such a difference, and I appreciate each and every one of you. All right, so let's jump right in. When we talk about childhood memories in English, we're almost always using past tenses. And I know, past tenses can be tricky, but don't worry. We're going to practice them so much today that they'll start to feel natural. The most common past tense is the simple past. I played outside every day. My mom made delicious food. We lived in a small house. Simple, straightforward. And this is what you'll use most often. But here's the thing. When you want to talk about habits or repeated actions in the past, we often use used to or would. For example, I used to play with my neighbors every afternoon. Or my grandmother would tell me stories before bed every night. These phrases are so useful because childhood is all about those repeated experiences, those patterns and routines that made up our daily lives, you know? Let me share a personal memory with you. When I was about 7 years old, I used to wake up every Saturday morning and run to my grandmother's house. She lived just down the street, and every single Saturday, without fail, she would make pancakes for me. Not just any pancakes, but these amazing blueberry pancakes with lots of butter and maple syrup. I can still remember the smell, the taste, the feeling of sitting in her sunny kitchen. That was my routine, my Saturday morning ritual, and it's one of my happiest childhood memories. See how I used to and would there? I used to wake up for the habit of waking up, and she would make for the repeated action of making pancakes. This is how we naturally talk about childhood routines and habits in English. Now, let's talk about vocabulary for describing your childhood home and neighborhood. Because when you share memories, you often need to set the scene, right? You need to help people visualize where these memories took place. You might say, I grew up in a small town, or I grew up in a big city. The phrase, I grew up, is essential. It means you spent your childhood there. You could also say, I was raised in, which has the same meaning. I was raised in the countryside, or I was raised in the suburbs. Let me teach you some useful words for describing your neighborhood. If you lived in a quiet area, you might say, I grew up in a peaceful neighborhood. If there were lots of children, you could say, there were many kids in my neighborhood, or my street was full of children my age. If you live near nature, you might say, I grew up surrounded by trees and fields, or there was a beautiful park near my house. And for describing your actual house, you could say, we lived in a small apartment, or we had a big house with a garden. You might mention specific rooms that were important to you. My favorite room was the kitchen, or I shared a bedroom with my sister, or we had a backyard where I used to play. Let me tell you about my childhood home. I grew up in a medium-sized town in a house with a big backyard. The backyard was my kingdom, you know? It had this huge oak tree that I used to climb all the time. My mom was always worried I would fall, but I never did. Under that tree, I had my secret hideout where I would read books and pretend I was in different worlds. That backyard, that tree, they were so important to my childhood. Are you following along so far? I want to make sure you're getting comfortable with these phrases because we're going to build on them throughout this episode. Now, let's talk about describing the people who were important in your childhood, because childhood memories are often about people, right? Your parents, your siblings, your friends, your teachers, your neighbors. When describing people from your childhood, you can use phrases like, my mom was very caring and kind, or my dad was strict but loving. For siblings, you might say, I have 2 brothers who were my best friends growing up, or I'm an only child, so I spent a lot of time with my cousins. For friends, you could say, I had a best friend named Maria who lived next door, or there was a group of us kids who played together every day. And you know what? It's nice to include little details that make these people come alive. Not just I had a friend, but I had a friend who always made me laugh, or I had a teacher who believed in me and changed my life. Actually, let me tell you about my childhood best friend, Sarah. We met when we were 5 years old on the first day of kindergarten. I was really shy, and I was sitting alone during lunch. Sarah came up to me with this huge smile and said, do you want to be friends? Just like that. So simple, so direct, and from that moment, we were inseparable. We did everything together. We rode our bikes, we had sleepovers, we created elaborate games and adventures in our imaginations. Sarah moved away when we were 12, and I was heartbroken. But you know what? Even now, decades later, when I think about my childhood, Sarah is in so many of my happiest memories.
That's how important childhood friendships are, right? They shape us in ways we don't even realize. So when you're talking about people from your childhood in English, don't just list them. Tell stories about them. Share what made them special. Explain how they made you feel. This is what makes your memories interesting and meaningful to others. Now, let's practice talking about typical childhood activities. What did you do as a child? How did you spend your time? This is where you can really make your memories come alive with specific details and descriptions. You might talk about playing outside. I used to play in the street with my neighbors, or we would ride our bikes around the neighborhood for hours. Maybe you played specific games. We played hide and seek all the time, or I loved playing soccer with my friends, or we used to build forts out of blankets and pillows. Or maybe you spent time on hobbies. I loved drawing and painting as a child, or I was obsessed with collecting stamps, or I used to spend hours reading books in my room. The key is to be specific. Don't just say, I played games. Say what games. Don't just say, I had hobbies. Say which hobbies and why you loved them. For me, one of my favorite childhood activities was exploring the woods near my house. There was this little forest area, not too big, but to me as a child, it felt like a massive wilderness. My friends and I would spend entire summer days in those woods. We would climb trees, we would build stick houses, we would catch frogs in the creek, we would pretend we were explorers discovering new lands. And here's a funny memory. One time, I was probably 9 years old, I decided I was going to build the best treehouse ever. I gathered all these branches and tried to create this elaborate structure in a tree. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. It fell apart almost immediately, but I was so proud of it at the time. I thought I was an engineering genius. Kids, right? We think we can do anything. Let me ask you something. What did you love to do as a child? What activities made you happiest? Think about it for a moment. Because these memories, these simple activities, they're often the ones that bring us the most joy when we remember them. Now, let's talk about describing your feelings and emotions from childhood. This is really important because childhood memories aren't just facts, they're feelings. They're about how things made you feel. You might say, I felt safe and loved in my childhood, or I was a very happy child, or I was shy and quiet as a kid. You can describe specific emotional memories. I remember feeling so proud when I learned to ride a bike, or I felt scared on my first day of school, or I was excited every time we visited my grandparents. Sometimes childhood memories include difficult emotions too, and it's okay to talk about those. I felt lonely sometimes because I didn't have many friends, or I was anxious about tests at school, or I remember feeling sad when my pet died. Being honest about emotions makes you more relatable and authentic. Let me share something vulnerable with you. When I was about 8 years old, I desperately wanted to be popular at school. I wasn't, though. I was kind of awkward and nerdy. I loved reading more than playing sports, and I was terrible at the games the popular kids played. And I remember feeling left out a lot. I would watch the cool kids laughing together and I would feel this ache in my chest, wishing I could be part of their group. But you know what? Looking back now, I'm actually grateful for that experience. Being the quiet, bookish kid taught me empathy. It taught me to notice other kids who were left out and include them. It made me kinder. Sometimes our painful childhood memories teach us the most valuable lessons, don't they? So when you're sharing childhood memories in English, don't be afraid to include emotions. Say how things made you feel. This is what makes your stories real and meaningful. Let's practice some more phrases for talking about school memories, because school is such a big part of childhood for most people. You might say, I went to a small elementary school in my neighborhood, or I attended a big school with hundreds of students. You can describe your experience. I enjoyed school most of the time, or I found school challenging but interesting, or honestly, I didn't like school very much. You can talk about specific subjects. My favorite subject was art, or I was good at math but terrible at spelling, or I loved science class because we did experiments. And you can mention teachers. I had a wonderful teacher in 3rd grade who encouraged me to write, or there was one strict teacher who everyone was afraid of. School memories often include funny or embarrassing moments. I remember once I fell asleep during a boring lecture, or I got in trouble for talking too much in class, or I was so nervous during presentations that my hands would shake. Oh my goodness, I have so many embarrassing school memories. Let me tell you about one. When I was in 4th grade, we had to do a presentation about our family. I was so nervous. I stood up in front of the class and my mind just went completely blank. I forgot everything I wanted to say. I just stood there, frozen, staring at everyone. It felt like hours, but it was probably only about 10 seconds. Then I burst into tears and ran out of the classroom. I was so humiliated. I thought everyone would make fun of me forever. But you know what? By the next day, most kids had already forgotten about it. Children move on quickly from these things. And now, looking back, I can laugh about it. It's just a funny, slightly embarrassing memory that reminds me how seriously we take things as children. Do you have memories like that? Those embarrassing moments that felt like the end of the world at the time, but now they're just amusing stories? That's part of childhood, isn't it? Now, let's talk about describing family traditions and celebrations from your childhood. These are often some of our most treasured memories, and they're wonderful to share in conversations. You might say, every Sunday, my family used to have dinner together at my grandmother's house, or we had a tradition of going to the beach every summer. You can describe holiday celebrations. Christmas was always special in my family, or we celebrated my birthday with a big party every year, or during the holidays, my mom would make traditional foods. Be specific about what made these traditions special. What I loved most about these Sunday dinners was how everyone talked and laughed together, or the best part of our summer beach trips was building sandcastles with my dad. In my family, we had this tradition every New Year's Eve. We would all stay up until midnight, which was so exciting for me as a child because I usually had to go to bed early. At midnight, we would go outside and my dad would set off fireworks in the backyard. Just small, safe ones, but to me, they were magical. I would stand there with my mom, wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the colors explode in the sky, and I would feel so special, so loved, so lucky to be part of my family. We did this every year until I was about 13, and then we stopped for some reason. Maybe we moved, or maybe my parents got busier, I don't remember. But I still think about those New Year's Eve fireworks sometimes, and they make me smile. Traditions like these, they're not just activities, right? They're about connection, about belonging, about creating memories together.
And when you share them in English, you're sharing a piece of your heart, a piece of your family's story. Let's practice talking about food memories from childhood, because oh my goodness, childhood food memories are so powerful, aren't they? The taste and smell of certain foods can transport us right back to being children. You might say, my mom used to make the best pasta sauce, or my grandmother's cooking was amazing, or I remember the taste of the street food we used to buy near school. You can describe specific dishes. There was this soup my mom made that I absolutely loved. Or every Friday, my dad would bring home pizza for dinner. Or I hated vegetables as a child, especially Brussels sprouts. Include sensory details. I can still remember the smell of fresh bread baking in my grandmother's kitchen. Or the taste of my mom's chocolate cake was unforgettable. These sensory details make your memories come alive for the listener. Let me tell you about a food memory that's so vivid for me. When I was a child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my mom used to make grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. Simple, right? But she made them perfectly, crispy on the outside with the cheese all melted and gooey on the inside, and she would cut them diagonally and serve them with tomato soup.
I remember sitting at our kitchen table. It was this yellow table with chrome legs, very retro looking, and I would dip my grilled cheese into the soup and take a bite. The combination of the crispy, buttery bread, the melted cheese, and the warm, sweet tomato soup, it was perfection to my child self. It was comfort, it was safety, it was love on a plate. Even now, whenever I eat a grilled cheese sandwich, I think of my mom and that yellow table and feeling completely content and cared for. Food memories are powerful like that, you know? They're not just about taste, they're about feeling loved and secure. Now, let's talk about using descriptive language to make your childhood memories more interesting and vivid, because when you're speaking English, especially at the B1 level, using good adjectives and descriptive phrases really improves your storytelling. Instead of just saying, I had a dog, say, I had a fluffy, energetic dog named Max who was my best friend. Instead of, my house was nice, say, my house was cozy and warm with colorful flowers in the garden. You can use adjectives to describe places: beautiful, quiet, busy, colorful, sunny, peaceful. For people, kind, strict, funny, patient, loving, creative. For feelings, excited, nervous, proud, happy, scared, curious. For activities, fun, challenging, boring, exciting, relaxing, adventurous. Let me practice this with a memory. Instead of saying, I went to the park with my dad, I could say, every Saturday morning, my dad would take me to this beautiful park that had tall trees and a sparkling pond. We would feed the ducks with old bread, and my dad would push me on the swings until I felt like I was flying. Those mornings were peaceful and special, just the two of us spending time together. See the difference? The second version paints a picture. It helps the listener see and feel what I experienced. And this is how you want to talk about your memories in English, with details, with description, with color, and life. Actually, let me tell you more about those park mornings with my dad. He was always so busy with work during the week, so Saturday mornings were our special time. I remember he would let me choose what we did. Sometimes we fed the ducks, sometimes we played on the playground, sometimes we just walked around talking about everything and nothing. There was one particular Saturday, I must have been about 6, and I found a beautiful feather on the ground. It was iridescent, all shimmery blues and greens. I was fascinated by it. And my dad, instead of rushing me along, sat down with me on a bench and we examined that feather for probably 20 minutes. He told me it might be from a magpie or a crow. We talked about how birds need feathers to fly. He made me feel like my curiosity and wonder were important, like they mattered. I kept that feather in a special box for years. I don't know what happened to it eventually, but I still remember finding it and my dad's patience and kindness in that moment. These are the kinds of details that make memories special, you know? Let me ask you, do you remember moments like this from your childhood? Those small, simple moments that meant so much? Think about how you would describe them in English. What details would you include? Now, let's talk about discussing childhood friendships and relationships, because friends are such an important part of growing up, and talking about childhood friendships is a natural part of conversations in English. You might say, I had a best friend who I did everything with, or I was part of a group of friends who played together every day. You can describe what you did together. We used to ride our bikes to the park, or we spent hours playing video games at each other's houses, or we created our own secret club with passwords and rules. You can talk about what made these friendships special. What I loved about my friend Tom was his sense of humor, or my friend Lisa and I understood each other without even talking, or my childhood friends accepted me exactly as I was. Sometimes childhood friendships end, and you can talk about that too. We stayed friends until high school, then we drifted apart, or she moved to another city and we lost touch, or we're still friends today actually, even after all these years. I want to tell you about my friend group when I was about 10 years old. There were 5 of us, all girls from my neighborhood. We called ourselves the Adventure Club. I know, so creative, right? We took it very seriously though. We would meet every afternoon after school and we would go on adventures. Our adventures were things like exploring the creek behind the school, or riding our bikes to the store to buy candy with our pocket money, or building elaborate forts in someone's backyard. To adults, these probably seemed like just kids playing, but to us, they were real adventures. We were explorers, we were pioneers, we were brave adventurers facing the unknown. The leader of our group was a girl named Jennifer. She was bold and fearless, always coming up with the wildest ideas. I was a bit more cautious, but I went along because I didn't want to seem scared. One time, Jennifer decided we should explore this old abandoned barn on the edge of our neighborhood. I was terrified, but I didn't say anything. We went into that barn and it was dark and creepy and full of spiderwebs. I hated every second of it, but I felt so proud of myself for being brave. And afterwards, we all sat outside the barn eating the snacks we brought, laughing and talking about how scary it was. That feeling of accomplishment, of facing a fear with friends by my side, I still remember it. Those friendships, they taught me about loyalty, about courage, about being yourself. Even though I'm not in touch with most of those girls anymore, they were so important to my childhood.
So when you talk about childhood friendships in English, share the stories. Talk about what you did together, what you learned from each other, how these friendships shaped you. This makes your memories rich and meaningful. Now, let's talk about discussing pets and animals from your childhood, because for many people, pets are incredibly important childhood memories. You might say, I had a dog named Charlie who was like my brother, or we had a cat that I loved so much, or I grew up on a farm, so we had lots of animals. You can describe your pet. My dog was big and friendly with brown fur, or my cat was small and gray with green eyes. Talk about what you did with your pet.
I used to take my dog for walks every day, or my cat would sleep on my bed every night, or I was responsible for feeding the fish every morning, and include emotional connections. My dog was my best friend when I felt lonely, or I told all my secrets to my cat, or losing my pet was one of the saddest moments of my childhood. Oh, I have to tell you about my childhood pet. When I was 8, my parents surprised me with a puppy for my birthday. He was a golden retriever, and I named him Buddy. Original, I know. But that name fit him perfectly because he really was my buddy, my companion, my loyal friend. Buddy was the sweetest, most patient dog. I would dress him up in my clothes. I would read books to him. I would tell him all my problems and worries. He would just sit there, looking at me with his big brown eyes, like he understood every word. Of course he didn't, but it felt like he did. We grew up together, all through elementary school, middle school, and high school. Buddy was there. He was there when I came home sad from a bad day at school. He was there when I was excited about good news. He was there on ordinary days, just being a comforting, loving presence. When I was 17, Buddy got sick. He was old by then, almost 10 years old, and we had to make the difficult decision to let him go. I cried for days. It was my first real experience with grief, with loss. But you know what? I was also so grateful for those 9 years with him. He taught me about unconditional love, about loyalty, about living in the moment. Even now, talking about Buddy makes me a little emotional. He was such an important part of my childhood. And when I share this memory with people, they understand. Most people have a pet story that touches their heart like this. If you didn't have pets growing up, that's okay too. You can talk about that. We weren't allowed to have pets in our apartment, or I always wanted a dog, but my parents said no, or I was allergic to animals, so we couldn't have pets. These are valid memories too. Let's talk now about describing childhood fears and challenges, because childhood wasn't all sunshine and happiness, right? We all had fears, worries, and difficulties as children. And being able to talk about these in English shows depth and honesty. You might say, I was afraid of the dark as a child, or I had a fear of dogs when I was young, or I was scared of thunderstorms. You can describe challenges. I struggled with reading when I first learned, or I found it hard to make friends at school, or I was very shy and had trouble speaking up in class. Talk about how you dealt with these fears or challenges. My parents helped me overcome my fear by leaving a nightlight on. Or gradually, I became more confident and less shy. Or my teacher was patient and helped me improve my reading skills. I had this intense fear of monsters when I was little, probably from about age 4 to 7. I was convinced that monsters lived under my bed and in my closet. Every night, I would make my dad check under the bed and in the closet before I could go to sleep. And even after he checked, I would lie awake, terrified, listening to every creak and sound in the house. My mom tried to tell me monsters weren't real, but I didn't believe her. How could she know for sure? She wasn't in my room at night. So my dad came up with a solution. He made me monster spray. It was just water in a spray bottle with some lavender scent, but he told me it was special spray that kept monsters away. Every night we would spray it around my room, and then I could sleep peacefully. Looking back, it's funny and sweet how my parents handled my fear. They didn't dismiss it or make fun of me. They took my fear seriously and found a creative way to help me feel safe. That's good parenting, you know? Eventually, I outgrew the fear. I don't remember exactly when I stopped believing in monsters, but gradually the fear just faded away. Now I can laugh about it, but at the time, it was very real and very scary to me. So when you share childhood fears and challenges in English, it's okay to show vulnerability. It makes you human and relatable. Everyone was scared of something as a child. Everyone faced challenges. Sharing these experiences creates connection and understanding. Are you still with me? I know we've covered a lot, but I hope you're finding all of this useful.
I want you to feel confident talking about your childhood in English, with all its joy and challenges, all its ordinary moments and special memories. Now, let's talk about describing seasonal and weather memories from childhood, because often our childhood memories are connected to specific seasons or weather conditions, and these details make your stories more vivid. You might say, I remember hot summer days when we played outside until dark, or winter was magical when I was a child because of the snow, or I loved autumn because of the colorful leaves. You can be specific. Every spring the cherry blossoms would bloom near my house, or summer meant long school holidays and swimming every day. Include what you did in different seasons. In winter, we used to build snowmen and have snowball fights, or summer was all about going to the beach and eating ice cream, or autumn meant jumping in piles of leaves that my dad raked. For me, summer has the strongest childhood memories. Summer meant freedom. School was out, the days were long and warm, and every day felt like an adventure. I remember the feeling of waking up and knowing I had the whole day ahead of me, with nothing scheduled, nothing required. Pure freedom. My neighborhood friends and I would meet outside right after breakfast, and we wouldn't go home until our parents called us for dinner. We would ride bikes, we would play games, we would go to the pool, we would buy popsicles from the ice cream truck. The ice cream truck. Oh my goodness, do you remember if you had ice cream trucks in your neighborhood? The ice cream truck would come around every afternoon, playing this cheerful music that you could hear from blocks away. All us kids would run to our parents begging for money, and then we'd race to catch the truck. I always got the same thing, a strawberry shortcake ice cream bar. Always. It was my favorite. Those summer days felt endless. The sun seemed to stay up forever, and we squeezed every possible moment of play out of each day. When my mom would call me home for dinner, I always felt like I had lived a whole lifetime in just one day. That's how rich and full childhood days can feel, you know? What about you? What season holds the strongest memories for you? Think about it. Think about the specific sights, sounds, and feelings of that season in your childhood. Let's practice talking about learning experiences and achievements from childhood. These are important memories because they show growth and development, and they're great to share in conversations. You might say, I learned to ride a bike when I was 6 years old, or I was so proud when I learned to swim, or I remember the day I could finally read a whole book by myself. You can describe the learning process. It took me a long time to learn, but I didn't give up. Or my dad taught me with patience and encouragement. Or I practiced every day until I got it right. I talk about how achieving something made you feel. I felt so proud and independent when I could ride my bike. Learning to swim gave me confidence, or I was excited to show everyone what I had learned. I want to tell you about learning to ride a bike because this is such a classic childhood memory, right? I was about 7 years old and all my friends already knew how to ride bikes. I was the only one who still had training wheels, and I felt so embarrassed about it. I desperately wanted to learn. My dad took me to this empty parking lot one Saturday morning.
He took off my training wheels, and I was immediately terrified. I kept saying, I can't do it, I'm going to fall, I'm scared. But my dad was so encouraging. He said, I'll hold the back of your seat. I won't let you fall. So I got on the bike, and my dad held the seat, and I started pedaling. At first, I was so wobbly and scared, but gradually I started to get the feel of it, the balance of it. And then, without telling me, my dad let go. I was riding by myself, and I didn't even realize it at first. When I finally looked back and saw that my dad wasn't holding on anymore, I panicked and fell immediately. But I wasn't hurt, and I wasn't upset. I was amazed. I had done it. I had actually ridden the bike by myself. Even if it was just for a few seconds, I had done it. We spent the rest of that morning practicing, and by the afternoon, I could ride around that parking lot confidently. I felt like I had conquered the world. That feeling of achievement, of overcoming fear and learning something new, I still remember it vividly. These kinds of memories, they're not just about learning a skill. They're about learning that we can do hard things, that practice and persistence pay off, that failure is okay as long as we keep trying. These are valuable lessons that stay with us. Now, let's talk about special occasions and birthday memories from childhood. Birthdays are often very important memories because they were days that were all about us, days when we felt special and celebrated. You might say, my birthday was always a big celebration in my family, or I used to have birthday parties with all my friends, or my mom would bake a special cake for my birthday every year. You can describe specific birthday memories. On my 8th birthday, I had a costume party. Or I remember one birthday when we went to an amusement park. Or my favorite birthday was when I got the toy I had been dreaming about. Be specific about what made birthdays special.
What I loved most about birthdays was having all my favorite people together. Or birthday mornings were exciting because I would find presents waiting for me. Or my grandmother always gave me money in a card and I felt so rich. Let me tell you about my 10th birthday because it was so memorable. I was obsessed with horses at that age. I had horse posters on my wall, horse books, horse toys. All I wanted for my 10th birthday was to go horseback riding. I had never done it before, but I dreamed about it constantly. My parents, bless them, arranged for me to go to a horse farm for my birthday. I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. When we got to the farm, there were these beautiful horses, and I got to ride one named Sunshine. She was a gentle, calm horse, perfect for a beginner. I felt like a princess riding that horse. It was even better than I had imagined. The instructor let me trot a little bit, and I felt so free, so happy, so alive. It was one of those perfect moments where reality matched the dream, you know? After the riding, we had a picnic at the farm, and my mom brought a cake she had decorated with horses. It was chocolate cake with chocolate frosting, my favorite. My best friends were there, and we ate cake and laughed and talked about the horses. It was a simple party, really, but it was absolutely perfect for me. I'm 40 now, and I still remember my 10th birthday like it was yesterday. That's how powerful these special childhood memories are. They stay with us forever. What about you? Do you have a birthday memory that stands out? A party or a gift or a moment that made you feel special and loved? These memories are wonderful to share because everyone can relate to the feeling of being celebrated on their birthday. Let's practice talking about everyday routines and ordinary moments from childhood. Because while special occasions are important, it's often the ordinary, everyday moments that make up the fabric of our childhood memories. You might say, my morning routine was always the same, or every day after school, I would do my homework and then play outside. You can describe family routines. We always ate dinner together as a family, or bedtime was at 8 o'clock every night, or Sunday mornings we would go to church and then have a big lunch. These ordinary moments might seem boring, but they're actually really important memories because they represent the stability and rhythm of childhood. You might say, I loved the predictability of my daily routine, or these simple everyday moments made me feel safe and secure. In my family, we had this evening routine that I loved. After dinner, my dad would do the dishes, my mom would clean up the kitchen, and I would sit at the kitchen table doing my homework. The TV would be on in the living room, but I could hear my parents talking quietly while they worked. Sometimes they would sing along to songs on the radio. When I finished my homework, I would show it to my mom and she would check it. If I got stuck on something, she would help me figure it out. Then I could watch TV for a little while before bed. It was such a simple, ordinary routine, but it made me feel loved and cared for. I knew what to expect. I knew my parents were there. I felt safe. You know what? Now that I'm an adult, I realize how lucky I was to have that stability, that routine, those ordinary evenings with my family. Not every child has that. So even though these memories might seem boring or unimportant, they're actually precious. They represent love and security and family. So when you talk about your childhood in English, don't feel like you only need to share dramatic or exciting memories. The ordinary ones matter too. The everyday routines, the simple moments, the regular patterns of childhood life, they're all worth talking about. Now, let's discuss how to talk about changes and transitions in your childhood. Because childhood isn't static, right? Things change. You grow, circumstances change, your family might move or change in some way. You might say, when I was 10, my family moved to a new city. Or my parents separated when I was in elementary school. Or my little brother was born when I was 7 and everything changed. You can talk about how these changes affected you. Moving was hard because I had to leave my friends behind. Or at first, I was upset about having a new sibling, but then I learned to love being a big sister. You can talk about growing and changing yourself. As I got older, I became more independent. Or I went through a phase where I was rebellious and difficult. Or by the time I was 12, my interests had completely changed. Let me tell you about a big change in my childhood. When I was 11, my dad got a new job and we had to move to a different state. I was devastated. I didn't want to leave my school, my friends, my house, my neighborhood. Everything familiar was being taken away from me, and I had no choice in the matter. I remember crying for days when my parents told me. I begged them not to move. I promised I would be good forever if we could just stay. But of course we moved anyway. The first few months in our new town were really hard. I felt lonely and lost. I missed my old friends terribly. I hated my new school. I blamed my parents for ruining my life. But you know what? Gradually, things got better. I made new friends, I started to like my new school, I discovered new places to explore, and I realized that I was more adaptable than I thought. That move, as painful as it was at the time, taught me that I could handle change, that I could make new beginnings, that endings aren't always bad even when they're sad. Now, looking back, I'm grateful for that experience. It made me more flexible, more open to change, more empathetic to people who are going through transitions.
Sometimes the hardest childhood experiences teaches the most valuable lessons. So if you experience changes or difficult transitions in your childhood, it's okay to talk about them in English. You can be honest about how hard they were, while also talking about what you learned or how you grew from them. Let me ask you something. Are you feeling more confident now about talking about your childhood in English? I hope so, because we've covered so much ground, so many different aspects of childhood memories, so many phrases and expressions you can use. Let's talk about cultural aspects of childhood and how to explain them in English. Because if you're from a different country or culture than the person you're talking to, they might be curious about what childhood was like in your culture. You might say, "In my country, children are expected to respect their elders very much." Or, "Where I grew up, it was common for extended families to live together." You can explain traditions. "In my culture, we have a special ceremony when a child turns a certain age." Or, "Children in my country often help with family businesses from a young age." You can contrast your childhood with typical childhoods in other cultures. "Unlike here, we didn't have much technology when I was growing up." Or, "Children in my neighborhood had more freedom to play outside than kids seem to have today." When I talk about my American childhood with people from other countries, I often mention things like summer camp, which is a very American experience. I would go to summer camp for a week or two in the summers, staying in cabins with other kids, doing activities like swimming, archery, crafts, and singing around campfires. For people who didn't grow up with this tradition, it seems strange to send your child away for part of summer, but for me, summer camp was a normal and exciting part of childhood. Or I might explain about things like losing teeth and the tooth fairy. In American culture, when children lose their baby teeth, they put the tooth under their pillow, and supposedly a fairy comes at night and leaves money. I know this sounds bizarre if you didn't grow up with it, but as a child, I believed in the tooth fairy completely. I would lose a tooth and be so excited to put it under my pillow and find $1 there in the morning. When you explain cultural aspects of your childhood to English speakers from different backgrounds, use phrases like, "In my culture, we," or "Where I'm from, it's traditional to," or "This might seem strange, but in my country." These phrases help contextualize your memories and make them understandable to people from different backgrounds. Now, let's practice using sensory language to describe childhood memories. This is so important because sensory details, things you saw, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched, make memories come alive. For sight, you might say, "I remember the bright colors of my childhood toys," or "I can still picture the sunset view from my bedroom window." For sound, "I remember the sound of my mother's voice singing lullabies," or "The neighborhood was always filled with the sounds of children playing." For smell, "I can still smell my grandmother's perfume," or "The scent of fresh-cut grass reminds me of summer days playing outside." For taste, "I remember the sweet taste of the candy we bought at the corner store." For touch, "I remember the soft texture of my favorite blanket," or "I can still feel the rough bark of the tree I used to climb." Let me give you a sensory-rich memory. I remember Sunday mornings at my grandmother's house. I would wake up to the smell of bacon cooking and coffee brewing. Those smells mixed together meant Sunday, meant family, meant love. I would go downstairs in my pajamas, and the kitchen would be warm and bright with morning sunlight coming through the windows. My grandmother would be at the stove, and she would give me a big hug. I remember how she smelled, like lavender soap and vanilla. She would pour me orange juice in a special glass, a fancy glass that she only used for grandchildren. The orange juice tasted sweeter in that special glass, or at least I thought so. I would sit at the kitchen table, and I could hear my grandfather in the living room reading the newspaper. I could hear the rustle of the paper as he turned the pages. My grandmother would serve breakfast, bacon and eggs and toast with butter and jam. The bacon was crispy, the eggs were soft, the toast was warm, and the butter would melt into it. After breakfast, my grandmother would let me help her wash the dishes. I would stand on a little stool at the sink, and I would dry the dishes while she washed. The dishwater was warm and soapy, and I liked making bubbles. My grandmother would tell me stories while we worked, stories about when she was young, stories about my mom when she was a little girl. These Sunday mornings, they're some of my most treasured childhood memories. And notice how much more vivid they are when I include sensory details. The smells, the sounds, the tastes, the feelings, they all help paint a complete picture. So when you talk about your childhood memories in English, try to include these sensory details. They make your memories more interesting and more real to the person listening. Let's talk now about using time expressions when discussing childhood. This helps organize your memories and make them clear to listeners. You might say, "when I was young," or "as a child," to introduce childhood memories generally. For specific ages, say, "when I was 7," or "at the age of 10."
For time periods, you can say during my early childhood, or in my teenage years, or throughout my childhood. For sequences of events, use first, then, after that, finally, or before, during, after. You might say, before I started school, I spent all day with my mom. Then, when I started school, I made new friends. After a few years, I became more independent. To show duration, use for and phrases like for many years or for a long time. I played piano for 5 years when I was a child, or we lived in that house for my entire childhood. Let me practice this with a memory sequence. When I was very young, maybe 3 or 4, I was afraid of dogs. Then, when I was 5, my neighbor got a friendly puppy, and I started to overcome my fear. By the time I was 7, I loved dogs and wanted one of my own. Finally, when I was 8, my parents got me my dog Buddy, and he was part of my life for the next 9 years. See how those time expressions help organize the story and make it clear? They guide the listener through the timeline of the memory. Now, I want to talk about something really important, connecting childhood memories to who you are today. Because when you share childhood memories, especially in professional or deeper personal conversations, it's powerful to reflect on how these experiences shaped you. You might say, that experience taught me to be more confident, or my childhood made me who I am today, or I learned important values from my parents that I still follow. You can be specific. Because I moved so much as a child, I learned to adapt to new situations easily, or growing up with limited resources taught me to be creative and resourceful. You might also say, looking back now, I understand why my parents did certain things, or as an adult, I appreciate my childhood more than I did at the time. This shows reflection and maturity. For me, my childhood experiences with reading and spending time alone taught me to be comfortable with solitude. I'm an introvert, and I think that's partly because I spent so much of my childhood happily alone with books. That's not a bad thing. It means I don't need constant social interaction to be happy. I can entertain myself.
I enjoy my own company. Also, having a somewhat challenging time socially in school made me empathetic to people who feel left out or different. In my work now, I always try to include people who seem shy or on the outside of the group. That comes directly from my childhood experiences of feeling excluded. So when I talk about my childhood in English, I sometimes make these connections. I think my love of reading as a child is why I became a content creator today. Or the way my parents encouraged my curiosity is something I try to do with the children in my life now. Making these connections shows self-awareness and depth. It shows you've thought about your experiences and learned from them. This is impressive in English conversations, especially professional ones. Let me check in with you. How are you doing? I know this has been a long episode, but I wanted to give you as much as possible to help you talk confidently about your childhood in English. Are you feeling inspired? Are you thinking about your own memories and how you would describe them? Let's practice some conversations you might have about childhood. Imagine someone asks you, what was your childhood like? Here's how you could respond using everything we've learned. You might say, oh, I had a pretty happy childhood overall. I grew up in a small town with my parents and 2 siblings. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. I spent most of my time playing outside with neighborhood friends. We used to ride bikes and explore the woods near our house. My mom was very loving and made sure we always felt cared for. Looking back, I'm grateful for how simple and peaceful my childhood was. See how that response uses different elements? It sets the scene, mentions people, describes activities, includes feelings, and reflects on it from an adult perspective. That's a well-rounded answer. Or if someone asks about a specific childhood memory, you might say, one memory that really stands out is when I learned to swim. I was about 6 years old and I was terrified of water. My dad took me to the pool every weekend and patiently taught me. At first, I wouldn't even put my face in the water, but gradually I got more comfortable. The day I finally swam across the pool by myself, my dad was so proud and I felt like I could do anything. That experience taught me that fear can be overcome with practice and support. This answer tells a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end. It includes emotions and reflections. It's the kind of answer that makes people feel connected to you. Now, let's talk about common mistakes English learners make when discussing childhood memories, so you can avoid them. One common mistake is mixing up past tenses. Remember, for completed actions in the past, use simple past. I played, not I have played. Use used to for past habits. I used to play, not I was used to play. And use past continuous for ongoing actions interrupted by something. I was playing when my mom called me. Another mistake is being too vague. Don't just say, my childhood was nice. Give details. What made it nice? Who was there?
What did you do? Details make memories interesting. Also, some learners forget to include emotions and feelings. Childhood memories are emotional. Don't just describe what happened, describe how it made you feel. And finally, some learners apologize for their memories or downplay them. My childhood was boring, probably not interesting to you. No, your childhood matters. Your memories are worth sharing. Be confident about them. Let me tell you, I've had conversations with English learners who had the most fascinating childhood stories, but they presented them as if they were boring or unimportant. One student told me almost apologetically about growing up in a rural village where she helped her family farm. She thought it was too simple and wouldn't interest me. But when I asked questions and she started sharing details, her childhood sounded amazing to me. She described the seasons of planting and harvesting, the animals they raised, the traditional festivals they celebrated, the closeness of the community. It was beautiful and interesting and so different from my suburban American childhood. Her experiences were valuable and worth sharing confidently. So please, when you share your childhood memories in English, do it with confidence. Your experiences are unique. They're interesting. They matter. Now, let's practice some phrases for when you're asked to compare your childhood to childhood today. This is a common conversation topic, especially with older people or in discussions about how times have changed. You might say, childhood today is very different from when I was young. Or, kids today have more technology than we had. Or, in some ways, childhood is easier now, but in other ways, it's harder. You can be specific. When I was a child, we played outside all the time, but kids today spend more time indoors with screens. Or, children today have more opportunities for education and activities than we had. You can also talk about things that haven't changed. Some things are the same, though. Kids still love to play and have fun. Or, the need for love and security hasn't changed, even if other things have. When I compare my childhood to childhood today, I notice so many differences. We didn't have smartphones or tablets or social media. We had one TV in the house, and we couldn't watch it whenever we wanted. If we wanted to talk to friends, we had to call their house phone and hope they were home, or we just went to their house and knocked on the door. We had more freedom in some ways. Our parents would let us go off and play for hours without checking on us. We would ride our bikes all over the neighborhood, and as long as we were home by dinner time, nobody worried. Today, that would seem irresponsible parenting, but back then it was normal. But in other ways, kids today have more opportunities. They have access to so much information and education through the internet. They can learn about different cultures and ideas easily. They have more diverse activities available to them. When I talk about this in English, I try to be balanced. There are pros and cons to both. I'm glad I had an analog childhood with lots of outdoor play and imagination, but I also see the benefits of the technology and opportunities available to children today. Let's talk about wrapping up conversations about childhood memories. You don't want to talk forever, and you want to end on a good note. You might say, well, those are some of my favorite childhood memories, or I could talk about my childhood for hours, but I'll stop there. You can thank the person for listening. Thanks for letting me share these memories with you. Or, it's been nice to reminisce about the past. You can turn it back to them. What about you? What was your childhood like? Or do you have similar memories from when you were young? All right, we've covered so much today. We've talked about vocabulary for describing childhood, how to use past tenses correctly, how to describe people and places from your past, how to talk about activities and routines, how to include emotions and sensory details, and so much more. But more than just vocabulary and grammar, I hope you've gotten a sense of how to share your childhood stories in a way that's engaging and authentic. Because when you talk about your childhood in English, you're not just practicing language, you're sharing a piece of yourself. You're connecting with people on a human level.
You're telling the story of who you were and how you became who you are. Your childhood memories are precious. They're unique to you. No one else in the world has exactly the same memories you have. And when you share them in English, you're giving people a window into your world, your culture, your family, your experiences. That's beautiful and valuable. So here's what I want you to remember from today. First, use past tenses confidently. Simple past for completed actions, used to and would for past habits. Second, include details, sensory details, emotional details, specific names and places. Third, be honest and authentic. Share both happy memories and challenging ones. Fourth, make connections to who you are today. Show how your childhood experiences shaped you. And most importantly, be proud of your childhood memories. They're yours. They're part of your story. Share them with confidence and warmth. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one of your favorite childhood memories? Where did you grow up? What did you love to do as a child? Who were the important people in your childhood? Leave a comment below and practice describing your childhood memories in English. Use some of the phrases and vocabulary we learned today. Share a story, describe a person, talk about a place or an experience. Make it as detailed or as simple as you want. The important thing is to practice expressing yourself. And you know what? When you write that comment, you're not just practicing English, you're preserving your memories. You're honoring your childhood. You're sharing your story with the world. That's meaningful and beautiful. Please like and subscribe to English Club for more English learning podcasts. Your support truly helps us create more content like this for you. Every like, every subscription, every comment, it all encourages us to keep making these podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Before I go, I just want to say thank you for taking this journey through childhood memories with me today. Thank you for listening to my stories and letting me share these reflections with you. I hope this episode helps you feel more confident talking about your own childhood in English. Remember, your childhood matters. Your memories are important, and you have the language now to share them beautifully and confidently in English. Don't be afraid to open up and share your stories. People love hearing about childhood experiences. It's a universal topic that brings people together. Keep practicing your English. Keep sharing your stories. Keep being proud of who you are and where you came from. Your childhood made you who you are today, and that person is pretty amazing. See you in the next episode. Keep practicing your English, and remember, you're doing great. Take care, and until next time, happy reminiscing.